And when people come to me as clients, I say to them, was there something that made you get in touch at this time? And usually there's something that's happened that makes them think about what they want from their lives. Maybe they've been too focused on their careers and they haven't had time for dating. Maybe they haven't, they might be having a great career, might be having a great social life, but that bit has just got missed out, and then they want to do something about that.
Our ever-changing world calls upon the most courageous, resilient, and relentless of us to face its most extraordinary challenges. To help you embark on this journey, we present the Impactful Coaching Podcast, your oasis for inspiration and a beacon to spark the fires of greatness within you. I'm Joseph. I will be your ally in this journey to empower your potential. Join us each week as we dive deep into the heart of ambition, drive, and success to unravel compelling stories of daring leaders who dreamed, struggled, and achieved victory. Our journey begins now. How's everybody doing? This is Joseph. Welcome back, or welcome to, if this is your first time, to the Impactful Coaching Podcast, where we learn everything that there is to learn about the coaching space, whether we are talking about the difficult topics that we've covered in the past, such as anxiety and addictions, but we also get to delve into the fun side of life, which is dating. Now, for those of you who've been following episode after episode, you would know that I have had the opportunity to talk about dating once already, and it was very exciting. And so Christmas came early. I get to have another conversation in this space. It's a fascinating subject for me, just because, as those of you who listen to the episode know, I'm out of the game. Fingers crossed to remain in that way. But this is just something that I have a blast talking about and learning about. And I'm here today with a dating coach from the United Kingdom, Rachel New. Rachel, how's everything going with you today? How are you feeling?
Hi, Joseph. I'm feeling good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being on the program. As I've stated, there's certainly a lot that I'm interested in learning about this space. And for those of you who maybe you're not pausing, you're not going to go listen to the previous episode, or this is just your first time entering the project, whatever the case may be, I would just like to run through what's been my dating experience so people knows where I come from with this, which is I had one girlfriend that lasted about 3 months. And I look back on that with the same kind of nostalgia that people look back on those free internet CDs America Online used to send in the mail, 90 Days of Internet. It's kind of like, oh, I got a taste for what it's like. And then it was over. Didn't resubscribe, I guess. And then it was a dry spell for another 5 or so years. And then I met my partner of now 5 years, and marriage is probably within the next 2 to 3 years tops. She's half Taiwanese, and the Chinese zodiac is very important. So we're planning on having a horse for a kid. So we're aligning a lot of this based off the Chinese calendar. So that's been me. Rachel, I would love to start us off with that, just to hear about sort of what's been your experience with dating and how that's impacted your career path and what brought you to the dating coach world that you exist in today.
Yeah, so I started dating about 8 years ago after getting divorced. So I was married for a long time, and it was very good in lots of ways. And then it came to a natural end, and it was an amicable ending. So I enjoy working with people that are going through divorce, actually. And then I started dating. At the time, I was working at the University of Oxford in research in psychology. So I got interested in the psychological processes that were going on while I was dating. So I didn't know anything about online dating when I first started, but got introduced to all the dating apps. I think Tinder and OkCupid were the most popular at the time. And I noticed that there were all sorts of unwritten rules about online dating. That where do they come from? How did they evolve? Because they didn't exist before dating apps. So I started reading up on all the dating research in psychology, economics, sociology, and used that to help me to date in a more empowered way and to understand what was going on, and to then challenge me and my dates on why we were behaving in certain ways, or what emotional processes were going on. So then I started blogging about it. And then I started advising all my friends on their dating, and it seemed to be working. And then so that's how my dating coaching got started. So from kind of the interest in research, but also combining it with experimenting on my dates. I had it on my dating profile that I was a dating coach, so that obviously scared a few people off. But it was really a good way to date in an empowered way, to say, I'm carrying out an experiment and seeing how different people react to different types of messages or different types of dates.
I was on the verge of offering condolences for the divorce, but you said it was amicable and that everything
Yeah.
came to a natural end. And
Hmm.
I do have a spiritual opinion on this, which is nothing lasts forever, not even forever. So there is this idea that at some point two people will be in such complete fullness of one another that there is a time for a natural end. And I look at that like, well, probably not this lifetime. I'm kind of attracted to the idea of what could a person be like in the life after this, and committing to that is a small step in what I believe to be a much bigger picture. But that gets into my religious beliefs, and this isn't really the
Hmm.
time or place for that. But I appreciate just hearing that it was a handled well, because
Yeah.
it's not always handled well, right? Like divorces,
Yeah.
from
And I
what I
think
hear
it's
through osmosis, is exceedingly messy.
exactly, yeah, that's true. And I think, there's definitely, I like to bring some existentialism into my coaching in terms of, what journey are you on? What point are you at in the journey? And who can best help you at this stage in your journey? And I think you get to a certain stage in your life where your priorities change. Maybe you think, what do I want for this next part of my life? Which parts of myself am I not expressing with this person? However wonderful they may be. My ex-husband is now remarried, and I'm very happy, and I'm very happy for him. I have a new partner as well. Yeah, and it's still, it can still be painful and sad to think back, but at the same time, I think if you can accept that endings are a natural part of life, then you can learn skills to make them as positive as possible. Even grief doesn't have to be completely negative. It can be just a beautiful memory of some wonderful times that you had together, and you don't have to mourn it in a very painful way. I think you can still appreciate those good times and what you learned with that person.
I mean, every so often, the Marvel Cinematic Universe puts out a really great line. I mean, law of averages, right? There was like 2,000 movies that came out, so they're bound to say some stuff that was really profound. And one of the characters says, I'm paraphrasing it because I want to say it slightly differently, but he says, "What is love? Sorry, what is grief if not the perseverance of love?"
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Just because there's a lot of like existential and ephemeral threads established here, I wanted to ask you about, I guess, this idea of like experiencing different chapters and going through those changes. Because I noticed in your email that in part of your signature, you mentioned what book you're currently reading. Now,
Hmm.
I don't watch every email like a hawk, but I'm pretty sure I haven't seen that before. So
Hmm.
with a book like that, ideally you want to go in being a different person by the time you're done. So does reading a book represent a change in your lived experience?
I probably read about a book a week, so that's constantly changing. And I like to read fiction and non-fiction. So I think probably in the email signature you read it was non-fiction, but I also recommend a lot of fiction to my clients, and I think you can learn a lot about relationships from reading books. Although most novels seem to have dysfunctional relationships, you don't get many novels with happy relationships because there wouldn't be anything interesting there. But films and books, I think, are a great way to get some different perspectives on relationships. I do remember when I was thinking about ending my marriage, I did read an amazing book of poetry. I'm not really very good at understanding poetry, though I'd love to understand more. But there was this one book called 10 Poems to Change Your Life, or 10 Poems to something to do with love. I can't remember the exact title. And it was given to me by an aunt who's a nun. The poems were amazing and the explanations were amazing, but it was more the fact that the author had been through a divorce and seemed a very thoughtful person who'd thought about all those kind of stages in his life. It gave me a way of seeing that it could be something thoughtful, meaningful. Often we're taught that getting divorced is selfish or hedonistic, or you're just doing it for yourself and you're not thinking about the long-term impact on the institution of marriage or whatever, or it's going to affect the rest of the family. Not that I have any children, but it still has a wider impact on other family members. So that book was a great inspiration to me at that particular stage. So yeah, I hadn't thought about that book for a long time.
I do want to ask one more question just on the subject of divorce, but I don't want to make this the You Got Divorced podcast. So what I would like to know is how much of the societal pressure as well as familial pressure, peer pressure, colleague pressure may have influenced whether you felt like you needed to delay it, or if none of that had an effect on whether or not it was the decision that you and your then partner had to make. And the reason why I asked this is because, I mean, I flash back to a lot of the weddings that I've been to, and I've been to some weddings where the two people got married, didn't stay married. And there is an element of, I think, obligation to perhaps want to keep something going just because of the effect it's going to have on all of the people that we love, many of whom, by the way, have probably put some money down in the interest of the success of the marriage. So I think that that is definitely an influence. What I would like to hear is how much of that was a deciding factor in when you did it, as well as wanting to do it.
For me, it was my mum had died about 6 months before, and that had focused me on thinking, what do I want from my life? You know, she died, she was 69. So I calculated if I lived to the same age, how much longer would I have, and how did I want to spend that time? And I also was clearing out her house. I was on my own quite a lot, living in London in her house. And it gave me a taste of the life that I'd had before I'd got married, when I was at university, and you know, that independence and being part of a lot of culture and diversity. So those were kind of two things that pushed me towards making the decision at that time, I think, and just feeling like I'd been the one to organise everything for the funeral and organising the family, and I just felt very empowered and very strong in a way that maybe I hadn't before. And I thought, yes, I can do this. This is what I want for my life. So I think, we do get these crisis points where we think, and when people come to me as clients, I say to them, you know, was there something that made you get in touch at this time? And usually there's something that's happened that makes them think about what they want from their lives. Maybe they've been too focused on their careers and they haven't had time for dating. Maybe they might be having a great career, might be having a great social life, but that bit has just got missed out, and then they want to do something about that.
Well, let me formally offer condolences for the loss of your mother. My partner and I were not, I wouldn't say we're on the tail end, because I don't think there's such a thing, but my partner lost her father in July, and we're actually in the midst of cleaning the parental house out now too. And she was having some difficulty because it felt like a step back, coming back into living in a home that she had thought she had moved out of and was going to stay out of permanently. But the point that I made is yes, it's the same house, but it's not going to be the same home. We're changing things. The walls might be painted. Things are going to be cleared out. Furniture is going to be moved around. Yeah, it's the same address, like, you know, but other than that, I mean, at the start, I upgraded the internet. So, you know, we're definitely changing some things around here. And I think that's what an important thing too, is the idea of something having, being rooted in familiarity, but finding an opportunity for it to be reinvented in a new way, so that it doesn't feel like a step back and it does feel like a step forward.
Yeah, it's a transformation of something. And, you know, the memories that you have from the objects in the house, just as you say, the decor, the furniture, everything has meaning, and it's a very therapeutic experience, I think, to go through someone's things and look at the history of them, where they came from, what you're going to do with them, tell the stories. So I would say take your time with that, because it can be a very healing experience.
Yeah, she just unearthed a bunch of Polly Pockets, so we're going to be going through those. So one thing is, if at any point I ask a question and it was something you'd already said prior, please bear with me. I have like 12 things that are like blinking and flashing as I do this, because I'm kind of like producing while I'm recording it. So sorry about that. But one thing that I just wanted to add to this before we kind of like dive into the dating talk, which is what line of work were you largely focused on? Because you talked about your interest in the psychological process. Was your long form career in psychology, or are you coming at this from a different career point?
So my first career was as a school teacher in high school, teaching psychology and maths up to age 18. So I loved that. It was very creative and loved the relationship with young people. And then I moved to working in a research lab at the University of Oxford, We were working on intergroup contact in social psychology, which is the theory that if you have prejudices or feel threatened or afraid of groups of people that are different from you, that can be rectified, improved, reduced by having positive, meaningful interactions with members of those groups. So, for example, in the UK at the moment, we have a lot of fear that's being stoked by the government about refugees. Once you get to know some refugees, your attitude towards them and your feelings towards them are completely different. You realize you have things in common with them, you form an emotional bond with them, and it's just incredible how that can completely change your attitudes, your political beliefs, your desire to help. I've seen it firsthand locally, actually, with people that have been very afraid of feeling that refugees are taking their resources, people that are very isolated in the community or don't have many resources of their own, they're not working, they have disabilities, and are very needy in lots of ways. And those people often do feel threatened by the idea of people coming and taking their resources, which we know from the evidence isn't the case, but that's the emotional response. But once they've been introduced to some refugees and become friends with them, they're completely different in their approach. So there's a lot of research to back that up that's been going on for about 60 years, and our lab group was at the kind of forefront of that. The professor that I work for was the world expert, so it's very exciting and also relevant to dating, because in dating, diversity, people can experience diversity, whether it's class diversity or ethnic diversity or all sorts of other types of diversity on dating apps. So they might be introduced to people that they wouldn't have met in real life. So it's a great opportunity for people to mix more and for integration in society to increase. And there is quite a lot of evidence that happens. Obviously, there's dangers with people dating people from different ethnic groups in terms of racism and that kind of thing. But overall, it's a positive outcome. I think it's looking good. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so it's very interesting to see the intersection of those two areas.
I'll ask one question on the subject of the refugees, just because I certainly see that subject brought a lot just in the. I'm not on this program, but I do listen to a fair amount of podcasts. I may not read a lot, but I do have a lot of words said to me, so I like to think that I've anteed up in that regard. But I'm curious to hear about, as much as you can speak to, what is the long-term outlook of the refugee intake, because I can see a concern coming from the idea that the more they come in, what happens to all these other nations who are probably losing some of their best people and are unable to do the corrective measures that they may take in order to improve their situation. So is there an end game here, or is it just a matter of seeing what needs to be corrected in the world globally before the nations who can provide the care and the resources needs to alter course?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very slow process, isn't it, for nations to see the impact of what they're doing. It's very sad that the compassion and empathy seem to be missing so much in so many parts of the world. I think all we can do is be welcoming to people, and we know that the economic benefits of people coming from other countries is incredible. We gain so much from their expertise and their skills and their contributions that are not financial. Like the refugees that I know are contributing so much locally in our community. We have had some very moving refugee concerts that have been put on by refugees, and we've all been dancing together. It's such an enriching experience. So I hope that the countries that are losing their best people will eventually see that it's not in their best interests. But it's a shame that things have to be measured in those ways, I think. And what's I think is especially sad is, during COVID, there was a lot of compassion and community support, and it sometimes feels like that's been forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Well, suffice it to say, I don't think we want to deal with another COVID situation just to bring all that back. Ideally, we
Mm.
have some other way that we can do
We
this.
have climate change crisis instead.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yes, politics is relevant today. So, people look for people with similar politics. We know that people will look to see if people agree with them on things like climate change, but also it's interesting that people want to date people that have been through therapy, and I think that's very promising as well. That these things are more important, and people are more open to talk about them,
Mm-hmm.
and about their emotions in general. Like being vulnerable, being compassionate towards yourself, or all of these emotional issues are
Mm-hmm.
much more out in the open now. So I'm in the middle of writing an article. I don't know where it's going to go, about how relationship skills are at the heart of the UK's government's problems. The reason that they're behaving in the ways they are is I think down to poor relationship skills. So I'd like them to get some coaching.
Mm-hmm. I would say from my point of view, when I was on the dating market, and by the way, I'm not a huge fan of calling it the market, but it is one of the common terms that is brought up. The ability to be vulnerable and not be so worried about status was something I was really thankful for, because my father would always worry about the fact that I wasn't consistently working full time with benefits and that I didn't have a car. He's like, "Well, how are you going to pick up your date?" I'm like, well, I don't know, Dad. Public transit, Uber, taxis. Maybe we'll just walk somewhere. Like there's 100 solutions to the problem, but there's a very narrow view of what status I should have as a person, and it took away the work and the accomplishments that I did have just because I didn't align with the accomplishments, the preconceived ones.
That is such a big area in my work, is dealing with the fears and worries of people's parents, because we internalize so much, and often the parents don't mean to make us worry or feel bad, but that those are their particular worries. But it's so powerful, isn't it? I think, and you get often we get that over a long period of time.
Credit to my dad is that his mind definitely had changed. I think COVID was a big factor in this. It's because of how I, for one, because I basically lived the way everybody else had to live during lockdown voluntarily. So it was an environment where I could thrive because I was already sort of ahead of the game in that regard. And but by the time that we started being, let out of our homes again, my dad had really made peace with the fact that the world has changed and we're in a new millennium now. And so while his way of thinking wasn't obsolete, people could still take that path, especially you leave out of like the densely concentrated urban areas and you start heading into smaller towns and suburban areas. A lot of these ideas are more prevalent there because, well, for one, you have to have a car or else you're not getting anywhere. So there's that. But at the same time, there's also a way for new ways of thinking, new ways of living, and new ways of accomplishing things. And that helped me with dating quite a bit, just to make sure that like I can be confident in the way I do things and not necessarily the way that other people had done them and where the expectations were in relation to that. Sorry, I'll let you respond, and then the next thing that I want to ask is a very fundamental question.
I was just going to respond on the idea of cards and how things can be proxies for other things. Like a card can be represent this person can take care of me, or this person is reliable, or whatever. But in every culture, different things represent different things. Like in London, not many people have cars, so a car would be irrelevant. People would think it was very strange if somebody put a picture of themselves with their car on their dating profile, for example. And I'm just writing something else actually about who should pay on a date, and just what that represents. In terms of if you want to split the bill, that could either represent I support equality and independence in both people, or it could be I haven't got much money, or I'm tight with my money, or whatever. People can interpret everything that happens on dates in very different ways, and that's why it's always good to try and communicate. What does money represent for you? And the same with sex as well. What does sex represent for you? These conversations are really important. So it's interesting about the car, and I think it's good to reflect on the sort of cultural context of why you're having these responses to different elements in the person. And I guess people they want people to have a reliable job because that represents all sorts of other things about whether you are disciplined or driven or whatever, but
I think
often
as an
there's
indicator
still
of
a story
commitment, it's important.
behind it. Yeah, but you know, there could be a bigger story behind that you're making assumptions about or judging somebody for. So it's good to examine those. So what's your fundamental question?
So one thing that I tend to do is I like to ask for definitions as they relate to now. Like if I were to go open up the dictionary from like the 1980s and see if dating is in there, the definition might be one thing, but I think the definition has probably changed a wee bit since then. So I would like to just ask like straight up, like picture somebody who's never been on a date, never heard of this before. How do you describe dating to that person?
That's a good question. I have a group program that meets online, and we once had a half an hour debate about who should pay on a date. And it turned out that the person who was arguing that the man should pay on a date with a heterosexual woman was defining the word date in a completely different way from the rest of us. So it's a good point, actually. We should try and define these things. Yeah, and there's so many different words now, aren't there? I mean, hanging out and dating, and I don't know. I don't really keep up with all the jargon, but I think there's lots of different terms, and they all mean different things to different people. You know, if you meet someone that's a friend and ask them, would you like to go for coffee or would you like to hang out? That person doesn't know whether it's a date or not. And maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe you're just, you know, you're going to slowly evolve from friendship into something more romantic. But sometimes I think it is useful to clarify. And I think because people have different purposes for dating. Some people just want some short-term fun. Some people are looking for dating to lead to a long-term relationship. So there's all sorts of different purposes and intentions to dating. So a date could just be an evening out with two people where they are possibly exploring whether there's any physical or romantic attraction between them. That could be a first date, but when you get to a 10th date, I guess it means something different. But I guess you're always moving towards trying to find out more about what is the nature of our relationship, what can we celebrate about what we have in common, and how can we challenge each other and learn from each other. And that may or may not involve something sexual or romantic or some other word that you might want to use. So I think these things are so broad, but they lead to very interesting discussions on a date. You know, it's good to ask, you know, why are you here? What do you like about me? What are you enjoying about this date? What do you like about yourself? All of those questions are good, I think. And then there's the question of when does it stop being dating and when is it a relationship? You know, some people like to use the word relationship much earlier than others. And again, that's a conversation that you can have. It seems generally the case that the sort of 3-month mark is often a milestone where people will say, you know, where are things going? We kind of got to know each other a bit, or we can possibly, you know, have a think about whether this is going to go anywhere or not. But on the other hand, people date more than one person. People have all sorts of different arrangements now, so it's very difficult to pin down, I think. Sorry, is that any good as an answer?
I accept that it's difficult to pin down just because so many goals and so many different outlooks are there. What I like to do is just try to think about what is perhaps the most common, but in doing so, it might also be less relevant on average. And what I'm getting at with this is that I ask myself this question too as I'm writing it down. I'm like, okay, what would I define as dating? Yeah. And to say simply, it is a public display of a connection with someone else. And now that could be romantic. It could just be friends, because you have this thing. We have things called like friend dates. You have like play dates, and the one thing that it's pretty much always going to have in common is that someone sees you do it, which means that you can actually say, oh, on October 10th, 2023, these two people went out for coffee. It was a date. They didn't call it a date. They said, oh, we're just two friends going for coffee. But because there's a historical element to it, and that it is now sort of ingrained in both of their timelines, that is why I think the word date is used, because in relation to the passage of time. So if two friends want to go out and just play arcades or whatever, yeah, okay, now there's like not only romantic, but the two of them are just as far removed from the idea of romance as possible. So again, it goes back into the old school play date idea, right? We're just two dudes getting together playing, right? No big deal. So that's where like I've tried to figure it out, just in the sense of what does it have in common with all of these examples, regardless of whether there's romance or attraction, or if it's just a matter of hanging out and just doing whatever people feel like doing.
Yeah, I think if both people agree, there's an intentionality for both people, I think, then yes, it could be you could call that a date. I think if one person thinks it's a date and the other person doesn't, then
which comes up, yeah,
that would need to be addressed. But yeah, you're on a journey of discovery, learning more about the connection. You might not have defined the connection yet, but there's an evolving connection between two people that's a shared experience for both of them. I think that would be something to add to your definition, maybe. The trust issue is quite interesting there, because people that contact coaches or therapists often, they're very fearful that it's going to be a difficult experience, that they're not going to connect with the person, or that they're going to feel worse after talking to them. So you put yourself in a position of vulnerability when you make an appointment with a coach or a therapist, especially the first time. So I think it's quite an interesting issue for coaches generally, in terms of how we market ourselves, to try and engender that trust and authenticity so that people do feel comfortable to contact us. But we also know that many people find it difficult to trust because of their previous experiences, because of their upbringing. People with have had attachment trauma, for example, may have a general distrust of people, and so they will be more vigilant to pick up cues of things that might not be safe. They might see someone's facial expression as being more negative than it actually is, for example. There's lots of unconscious processes that are going on at the level of the nervous system that we're not even aware of, that might lead us to be less trustful. So yeah, I just think it's very interesting. If someone's not in your in-group, you're less likely to trust them. But in this case, I'm not part of this person's in-group because I'm from the UK, and yet there was something that he was able to trust. But despite the being from an out-group. So yeah, I think factors of trust are very interesting in the sort of marketing of coaching and how you build up that relationship with your clients.
If it were me, I would think about maybe like the sense of humor for one, because I think British humor is direct and it's blunt, and it's also very articulate. So like I think of like David Mitchell and a lot of the stuff, but then it can lean into the absurdist side, like of course Monty Python, or even like the IT crowd.
Oh, but so I think none of that is helpful in a coach, really, is it? It's interesting. I mean, I do like to laugh with my clients, and yeah, there are definitely cultural differences in the kind of things that people will laugh about. But yeah, I think it can be hard to. That sort of satirical humor, is something you don't want to display early on in a coaching relationship.
Sure.
Because that might not feel safe for someone. You need to be very gentle, very, caring, that kind of thing.
Okay, fair enough. But I think I would also, the reason why I say that is because I would see it as an indicator of other personality traits and points of view. And it's expressed through a comedy as one outlet, but not exclusively that same outlet. So I think that's kind of like where I'm going with it. Not necessarily, yes, how do you rip into your clients right away?
Yeah, I have done some stand-up comedy actually. Okay, and I have got some clients from it. So that supports your hypothesis. Yeah, sure, and I think some people are maybe they're sick of the dating life, or they just want a different perspective on it, and someone that can be a bit tongue-in-cheek about it and laugh about it can give you some perspective. So I guess it can be a useful approach. With coaching, you've got so many different models of coaching. Like I'm moving more into a therapeutic model these days. When I first started, I was more kind of here are some practical tips to improve your dating based on research, so very evidence-based, very practical. Whereas now I do more sort of therapeutic coaching, thinking about people's backgrounds and childhoods and cultures and emotions, kind of mindful approach, more reflective. So yeah, I think these people want different people want different approaches.
Well, one thing that you make a matter of great importance is the idea of ethical dating, and in the interest of like defining that as well. So how do you tie in what we've talked about so far, and what exactly do you distinguish as the ethical dating?
When I first started using that phrase, ethical dating, I was trying to challenge people to change the norms on dating apps. So, things like ghosting, where people would just accept, oh, this is what people do on dating apps. I've observed other people doing it. It must be acceptable, so I'm going to do it. And we know from research that if you've been ghosted, you're more likely to ghost yourself. I would want people to feel empowered by saying, we can change this. We can challenge people in a gentle way. There's good and bad ways to challenge people's behaviour. Making them feel bad about it and telling them off never works. You've got to, be much more indirect, much more supportive and curious rather than judgmental. But I remember when I first started dating, I had very few negative experiences. And I guess I partially would put that down to I'm giving over some kind of vibe that this is how I expect to be treated. I expect to be treated well. I wouldn't dream of, I wouldn't be afraid that anyone was going to treat me badly. But I'm sure that's not, the full picture. But I did have almost all positive experiences. But occasionally, if somebody didn't message me back after a third date or something like that, I wouldn't feel bad about it, because I had a healthy self-image. So I would just be curious about it. So I'd send them a multiple choice question. Just curious to know why you chose not to message me. No judgment. Was it A, B, C, D, or E? And I give them some choices. And I would always get a reply, and it would be useful data collection for my coaching work. So I feel like that would be an indirect way to get people to think about, well, why did I do that? What was I afraid that would happen if I did send a message back? Why did I feel like running away at that particular point? And I would have a lot of empathy. We all have a slight tendency towards being a little bit avoidant or a little bit clingy, even if we have a secure attachment experience in our childhood. So I guess when I first started coaching, I would identify more with the avoidant kind of behaviour. So if somebody else was avoidant, I'd have a lot of empathy for that and not get annoyed with them or be upset by it. So in challenging their behaviour, I would feel that I was challenging the norms of dating and encouraging better behaviour online, and that's quite empowering. And for people that often feel quite passive, that they're being treated badly by somebody else, I would encourage them to say, you can have an impact here. You can challenge that person. You can encourage people to behave in particular ways. You can say at the beginning of a dating experience, let's agree that we're not going to ghost each other if things don't work out. Let's agree this is how, if things come to an end, this is how we're going to communicate it. We're going to speak to each other face to face, or we're going to be happy with the text, or whatever it is. So you're articulating those things and indirectly saying, this is how I expect to be treated. This is a normal way, an acceptable way to treat people on dating apps. We don't have to hide behind that anonymity and just go along with what everybody else is doing. Behind every dating profile is a real human being with their own fears and insecurities, and sometimes they behave badly because they're trying to protect themselves or because they don't know any other way. So I think having an optimistic view of humanity, even on dating apps, can be empowering and can change the world. I remember writing an article called "Dating Can Change the World," and I definitely believe that's still the case.
I've been ghosted, not that I'm keeping track, but I think between 2 and 6 times. It wasn't too often, but it did come up a couple of times.
How did that feel?
It wasn't so good for the confidence. It made me feel like I was the one failing and that I was the one trying to earn this other person's continued attention. And so after it was very clear that I wasn't getting a response, it made me think, okay, well, what did I do? Maybe I was too imposing. Maybe I was too caught up. Because I remember when I first started doing background acting, my girlfriend of 5 years, I met her through background acting, but I had been doing it for a year at that point. But I do remember the first time that I had been on set, I was paired up with another person, attractive lady, worked in a zoo, helped bees. We'd spent all day talking, and then I just oh, you know what, yeah, I'm just going to ask this person out. And we texted, went back and forth. We were going to meet up. And then her interest just kind of like dissipated with each exchange. And then I remember last thing I messaged her, I said, so how are the bees? And I never even got a response out of that one. And I thought, you know what? I think I was probably so enamored with the whole experience that I associated all of that positivity with this one person, and maybe was seeing her more as like a milestone rather than the person that I was interested in dating. I can see now that she wasn't the right fit for me anyways, just in terms of like how my personality has developed. But yeah, that's my take on it as I look back on it now.
Well, I'm sorry you had that experience. I think when I work with people, it's a common scenario. What did I do wrong? Did I do too much of this or not enough of this? Encourage people to brainstorm at least 10 possible reasons that they might have done that have got nothing to do with you. They're not in the right place, they're afraid, they're freaked out, something's happened that means they haven't got space for dating, etc., etc. And yes, that doesn't excuse their behavior, but it does help you to see that, it's possibly it's their things that they haven't worked on that they need some help with that's causing them to behave in that way. And I think, you can become more resilient to that, I think. But at the same time, you can still challenge it. But yeah, so I think that's interesting, the idea that it was a kind of symbol of that exciting experience that you were having. And so then you associate it with success or failure of that whole experience rather than just the actual date.
And it's important to point out that unlike, say, working in an office or store or anywhere with a consistent staff and a consistent schedule, is that the film and TV industry is not consistent with the hours or the people that you work with. One day you're going to see 100 people on set, the next set on the next day it's 100 different people. So there is a little bit more of the pressure to like act now, because you might not see this person again for years. Maybe you see them next week. I mean, we're all part of the same industry, but there's a lot of us and we're not always cast. So I think there was a heightened sense of pressure as well to like, oh, you know what, this feels right in the moment. Let's act on this. So
it can feel right for you, and if it feels right for the other person, then those things just flow and they just happen and you go on a date. But if the other person has got some background issue and then it doesn't work out, but it doesn't mean that, you pushing things forward quickly was a bad thing. It's just that the other person couldn't handle it for whatever reason.
I'd love to tell you a different story, and then I want to ask you about AI, because we agreed we were going to talk about AI for this episode, and I love AI discussions as well as using it. So prior to seeing my current partner, I was quote unquote set up. Like I had a friend who was a guy. He's seeing a girl. She's got a friend who was interested in meeting me, and my friend receives a picture of her saying like, my girl wants to meet Joseph, and he shows me with a picture and he says, so you want to go on this? And I'm like, yeah, I think I will do that. It's not every day this happens. So we meet up. He wasn't there, but the two girls were there, and I spent the day hanging out, shooting the breeze, decent conversation. I forgot to put on deodorant, so overall I wouldn't give myself a great score, but it seemed good enough. And so I knew that the way these rules work, as much as I detest many of these rules, but these were the rules, which is, you don't message somebody right away. And I knew that, and I decided to subvert that anyways, because the kind of person that I would want to talk to is not the kind of person that is adamant about following these rules. So I didn't ask her out, but I just said, hey, it was great meeting you. And I forget what the rest of the message was. It was pretty casual. What ends up happening, I get a phone call from my guy friend saying like, you got to dial it back, man. So instead of telling me that, she tells her friend, who tells him, who has to call me and tell me that I got to calm down. Now, in her defense, she had just gotten out of a 3-year relationship and it was messy. But again, like, I didn't set this up. Like I was the one requested to come do this. So I was pretty pissy about that, not gonna lie. Just because it's like, well, can anybody else take responsibility for what happened here, or is it all?
That reminds me of, being about 5 years old in the playground. My friend fancies your friend.
Yeah, exactly.
I advocate straightforward communication. You express your needs. You say, this is making me feel uncomfortable because, I've just got out of a long-term relationship. Really sorry. Could we dial it back a bit? There's absolutely no reason why somebody can't say that to somebody else in a kind, gentle way. You say how you're feeling. You don't say the other person has made you feel like that. You say, when I hear from you really quickly, I feel freaked out, or I feel pressured, or whatever. You don't say it made me feel pressured. You just say, This is Marshall Rosenberg nonviolent communication principles. So when you messaged me, I felt uncomfortable. Would you consider, and then you might explain why, and then you say, would you consider doing this instead? So you give them a suggested alternative behaviour, but you leave it open to discuss, so it's a collaborative effect. And that collaborative, what's the word? Collaborative venture, project, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, and then if as long as the other person isn't super sensitive to criticism or to constructive suggestions for ways forward, then that should work. And if it doesn't, then it's a test, isn't it? It's like, well, if we can't even communicate about when to message each other, there's no hope. But yeah, that's definitely a not a good way to communicate the way that you've just described. But I have to say, it's quite funny.
Well, yeah, I find it funny too. Like, I'm happy to bring it up in that light.
Yeah, but yeah, you did nothing wrong there. I think I don't agree that the rule is that you mustn't text too quickly, mustn't message too quickly. I think everyone's different, and it's good to discuss. Are you the kind of person who likes to message a lot? Do you like to have a break after meeting someone before you message? You can have those meta dating conversations and make sure that you're doing what works for both of you. That's one, actually, it's the thing that my partner most appreciates about me is that he says he never has to second guess my mood or if I'm upset about anything. Not that I do get upset very often, because I'll just tell him. So he doesn't have to worry about doing any of that emotional labour. He knows that I'll tell him.
Yeah.
So I think that's a valuable relationship skill.
But I'm happy to be able to tell that story in a new context, just because I like to look back on my own personality and think like, I still, even in spite of all of that, I still value that person and I still pursue that person, and I wouldn't do that now, just because I put myself more in the mindset of, I'm not the person who has to earn this other person. This person is not a puzzle. It's not to be solved. It's either this sorts out correctly or it doesn't. But I think, I don't know if this is like a guy thing, but a lot of the times when we are really attracted to someone, we would rather alter ourselves in order to try to appease this other person. And it was a very difficult lesson for me to learn before I was ready for the relationship that I'm in now, is that I want to alter myself for my own reasons, not necessarily in service to somebody else. But I have to be accepted as I am now, so the two of us can grow in tandem rather than one grow in order to be deserving of the other.
Absolutely, yeah. I think appeasement strategies and adapting to be right for the other person, to please the other person, they're all survival strategies that we often inherit from our childhood. And I think it's very good to notice when those are happening and to decide, is this something I'm willing to change on, or is this fundamental to who I am? Let's talk about it.
One thing that my partner asked, and this was one of our more macabre conversations, but she said, like, what if she ever were to be, taken away from me due to a horrific incidences, would I just get an AI girlfriend? And my answer was, without hesitation, yes, absolutely. Not even a debate here. Now that's a bit of a ways off, but with a little bit of ingenuity, a person can piece together a pretty compelling AI partner.
But I have a good question. Would you rather have a good relationship with a clone of your partner or a bad relationship with the original?
That is a good question. A good relationship with a clone of my partner or a bad relationship with...
Or even just a mediocre relationship with the original.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, a mediocre relationship, sure. Yeah, no hesitation there. But
interesting.
Even a bad relationship, I would still do. Yeah, I would still select that, because there's a couple of reasons. One, I do believe in providence. Maybe for me, it doesn't exactly come across as a coincidence that my partner shares the same name as a girl I crushed on in elementary school for like 8 years, a manager that I had, a great teacher that I had. It's the same name that keeps coming up. And so for me, that name has a special place that is irreplaceable. And then there's like 100 other reasons that I want to get into, but the providence side of it is very strong. And I am a believer in a higher power. So even if it is rough and it's a difficult time, I would still stick through it, because I think it might be an opportunity to to grow and maybe yield an even more positive relationship from that. It's funny, when I went to my credit union to sign up for mutual funds, he showed me this big chart of like the market and how it starts from the 70s and it was updated all the way through to 2022 when I talked to him. And what it showed is that if you look at the market trajectory, it's always going upwards, but there are downturns. There was the recession, there was COVID, 9/11. These incidences did have a significant impact on it. But what an investor sees during these down points is actually a good investor sees a sale, sees an opportunity to actually buy more units. So that way, when the market does inevitably correct and go upwards, then it will continue on and then you'll actually get a better yield out of it. So bad situations can be good opportunities. So yeah, I would definitely go for the human in this one.
So that's like a growth mindset, I guess, that you value the learning from the challenges that a relationship goes through. You don't want it all to be easy. I guess the question also speaks to the idea of authenticity, that you value that the real human over something that could be exactly the same but not human. Is that part of your reasoning?
I suppose it is. I'm not against, like say for instance, if I had no partner, and I was seeing an ad for like an AI companion, I'd be like, well, I don't think I'm going to tell too many people about this, but I will certainly do it just because I think it's a good way to at least, it's kind of like, God, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's like a flight simulation, right? Like you want to run the simulations, try to get as much experience as you can before actually getting in the plane. So I think that something is there to help bridge that gap. I think that can help boost a person's ability to just think on the fly, be social, and maybe as these AIs get better, they can help people kind of figure out how to be an improved version of themselves. So I totally support it. I just, I might not necessarily talk about that on my Instagram, right? I might keep that private just because I think there's a little bit of an embarrassment associated with it.
Stigma,
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think that there's a lot of people that, for one reason or another, that's maybe not their fault. They haven't had the opportunities or the experiences, sort of social experiences of friendship and secure attachments. So they could definitely benefit, I think, from a responsive, sensitive AI that can give them some validation and affirmation and love, and then that can help to give them those positive experiences that we all need before we're ready for a relationship. When we come to a relationship, say in our mid-20s, we've had 25 years of great interactions with people, we're at a massive advantage to people that haven't. I have quite a few clients that, for reasons that are not their fault, they've not had any friends at school or not made friends at university, and they feel very isolated, and so they have all sorts of beliefs that there's something wrong with them, they're not lovable, that nothing can change, and they get very anxious in social situations. And I do think that AI partners could really help with that. Obviously there's some dangers of treating them badly and getting away with it, but I think that the benefits could definitely outweigh those risks. There's always risks associated with any new technology, but I'm very much optimistic about the possible benefits. We already have lots of AI therapists that we know are providing really good help and with really positive outcomes.
I just want to go on record and say, don't mistreat AI, because I'm pretty sure that when the singularity comes online, it's going to remember who did what. So whenever I ask ChatGPT for something, I say thank you afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. I do as well. Yeah. I think people that shout at their Google Homes or their Alexas, how can that not transfer? If you get annoyed with them, you're going to get annoyed with humans as well. So, and also if children are around and see you shouting at your Alexas and Google Homes, then what are they going to learn from that? So yeah, I always say thank you, and I'm sure that we're training the algorithms that they're using as well. So yeah, it's back to challenging norms and making a difference to dating.
So and just to close out the AI section of it, so aside from like AI partners, are you finding that AI has been helpful in any other ways in terms of maybe helping to create an algorithm to help match people a little bit more accurately, or anything else along those lines? I'm kind of spitballing, but I just wanted to throw it out there to see what else there is.
Um, I mean, I don't know. The dating apps are very secretive about their algorithms.
Sure. Yeah.
We do have some idea of the kind of methods that they use, and I'm sure that they will be using AI. There's lots of ways in which the algorithms can be improved. There's lots of unconscious bias. Well, I guess not unconscious because I do believe AIs will become conscious. Bias from the data that they're trained on, as well as the purpose that they're given. There are things that can improve there. Eventually, my vision is that we won't need dating apps anymore because everybody will have their own AI assistants that will just scour the internet, find people that like similar events or similar comedians or whatever to them and suggest that they go on a date. So we'll bypass the apps altogether and it'll be much more organic. And then people will also get help with their messaging. They'll get help with where to go on the dates. The dates will be set up for them. A lot of people find all of the online stuff really very, very draining. They hate messaging. They hate all the hard work that goes into all the browsing of the profiles. It can be very dispiriting, dehumanizing, like a consumer product, like the market, as you mentioned earlier. So I think all of that could be taken away. So the whole process could become much more back to real life dating. And I also think that people will value meeting people in real life more, that dating apps will completely disappear.
Mm-hmm. And I stand by my faith-based approach to it. I think if anybody is a faith-based person or a God-believing person, you can't believe in God and then not also believe in love as an indicator of that. Just so again, like all of the signs that I ascribe my relationship to, and then all of the compatibility. And we spent 3 years in a tiny apartment during COVID. But a lot of relationships fell apart during that. I was hesitating saying divorce because whatever, but like it did happen, right? The stats bear out, and we were fine for 3 years in that tiny little place. So like I was so happy to have met her in an environment where we had a commonality, but we didn't go there specifically for dating. It was more just like something that had come up, right? And again, I also asked her out like the same day that we had worked together, because I don't know if I'm going to see her again for like months, right? Somebody else might ask her out, didn't want to do that. And I'm more than happy to continue to champion that, is even if you don't always want to go to like dating events, just like going to some sort of event, like a painting event or meetup groups, stuff where you can just kind of do something that you enjoy doing. And if you happen to see someone there, you might have an opportunity. I think that's the perfect balance of having an intention, but also, having an ability to enjoy it regardless of what happens.
Yeah, I think this compartmentalizing of dating and social life is not healthy. I can understand why, especially for young people, they don't want to have an overlap in case things don't work out with someone and it's a member of their social group and then it's awkward. So, and people can be judged for their sexual behavior. So I can see why people would compartmentalize it. But really, I think it is more healthy to meet someone that maybe knows somebody that you know, or is part of the same reference groups. You have similar values, or that you can trust them. And these things are often indirect. So you go to a meetup group, you meet some people, they invite you to a party. At the party, you meet some other people, they invite you to something else, and then eventually you meet somebody and date them. So these things are not immediate. You have to build up that social circle. When I got divorced, I moved back to the city from the countryside. I had to build up a whole new group of friends, and I did go to lots of meetups. That was even the very first week that I was separated, where anyone who's been separated after a long-term relationship will know that you can't get out of bed for about 2 weeks because your anxiety levels are so high. It takes you about 5 hours to get out of bed. But my solution was to go to meetups, and as soon as I was socializing, I was absolutely fine, and it was just great to meet new people that had also just moved to London. I eventually met my partner through a networking event where I was ranting about how my previous partner had not understood unconscious bias, and I needed somebody that got data and was able to update their existing hypotheses in the light of new data. And somebody said, "Oh, I've got just the person for you," and it was very local, so that they only live a mile away. So I think the organic thing can work. It's not so efficient maybe in terms of you've got to go to a lot of social events, But I think it's healthy because we need to socialize anyway. It's good practice for getting to know new people and practicing those skills of what are good questions to ask people when I first meet them, and how do I judge which people have got red flags or which people aren't right for me. So yeah, definitely agree with that approach.
We do have to start to wrapping this up, so I just got a couple more that I want to do rapid fire. So one thing I was just curious about, which is because I noticed you have group coaching as part of your services. Just out of curiosity, for the fun of it, have you had people connect through the group coaching?
Not as far as I know. There have been some where I could see people had things in common, but as far as I know, maybe they haven't told me, but as far as I know, that hasn't happened. I mean, it's a tricky one because you want to create a safe space where people can be vulnerable and be open about their dating. So in a way, it's not conducive. We have had a reunion actually recently where we all met in person because it's all been online. So that was really nice. But no, not so far.
I can see it happening, right? Because if you get some guys together, some ladies
similar
together,
values, similar intentions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just thought I'd throw that one into
Yeah,
the
and
mix.
I think I'm one of the few group coaching programs that are mixed gender, so all genders are in on the same program, whereas a lot of people tend to separate them out and have male coaching programs and female coaching programs. But I like to not distinguish between genders. People can come of any gender, and we talk about people. We don't say I went on a date with a man. We say I went on a date with a person, so that it's general to everybody, and nobody feels that they have to be specific in talking about who they're dating or who they're attracted to as well. Because although we have these stereotypes, most of the latest research, especially in neuroscience, shows that the things that we have in common, that overlaps, are much greater than the differences when it comes to genders. We all have the same emotional needs. Falling in love is the same brain kind of processes for all genders, etc., etc. So I try to do gender neutral coaching.
I appreciate that approach to it. In terms of your platform as you have it now, the question comes in two parts. The first is like, what are some of the challenges that you feel like you're facing? What are some of the problems you're trying to solve? And it could be very technical if like you're looking for how you want to grow your projects or gain reach, rank higher on Google. What kind of things are you working on right now?
I think with coaching, you've got this passive consumption on social media where people are just browsing and happen to see a post or an advert or whatever, versus people that decide in advance that they want to get some coaching for their dating or for their relationships. We haven't talked about couples coaching, but I do that as well. I find that the second group are much more likely to follow through. Most people that get in touch, inspired by something they've seen on social media, don't follow through. They might have, say, one appointment with me, but then it fizzles out. Whereas people that are decided in advance, it's been their own, they've owned the decision, those people are much more likely to stay working with me. People often stay working with me for quite a long time once they see how it's working for them. Yeah, it's always a challenge. I quite enjoy doing social media. I like posting on Instagram and that kind of thing because you're part of a community and it's nice to celebrate the things that you're doing. So recently, a couple had a baby. A couple that I worked with one of the people in the couple, and they recently had a baby. So I posted a picture of the baby, and that got lots of likes. And it was just really lovely to be able to share that with people. But really, I don't think it's that effective for people that want to get serious about their dating and invest in, a sort of coaching program or a set of coaching consultations, rather than just, some people come for a one-off. I'm having this crisis in my relationship, or I've, had this misunderstanding with my date. What should I do? And that's always fun to work with people on. But it's even more rewarding to do than a sort of long-term thing. So I have that constant sort of dilemma. How much time should I put into social media versus Google Ads works better, because then people will Google, they want a coach that has a mindful approach or whatever, and then they'll find me. Mm-hmm. So most of my work comes through people emailing me via my website.
For the outlook for the next 5 years, and I always ask this one, but I'm really keen on it this time just because we brought AI into the mix here. So 5 years, do you have a vision for how you see things unfolding for your work and for your platform?
So I haven't actually really thought about that much. I mean, I feel like one thing that might happen with AI is that AIs themselves will start dating. So that would be interesting to people to think about. Would I date an AI? What happens if two AIs date each other? Would they need any coaching? And yeah, I think like I'm happy to integrate AI into, for example, creating good messages to send to people, because that's can be quite a hard process if not everybody feels that creative. I love thinking up silly messages or fun messages that people can send, but I think that AI could definitely help there. So it would be good to integrate that in and to make the whole process more efficient. Maybe, that I know that a colleague of mine has developed an app for heterosexual men to develop messages to help them with their dating. And I'm sure that, dating coaches will be involved in those kind of things in the future. But, I would also like to be involved in making the dating platforms more ethical and less biased. And I also say, as I said before, that I'm getting more involved in a therapeutic approach. And I have lots of ongoing training with sort of therapy, different therapeutic approaches, and incorporating internal family systems, for example, and mindfulness and somatic practices and that kind of thing. So I would definitely like to develop those more with coaching. And it'd be good to do more in-person coaching as well, rather than just online. Mm-hmm. I was in a community garden today where there was a set of benches around with some weeping willows trees all around, and it was a really beautiful setting. I thought this would be great to do an outdoor group coaching session sometime.
There's one other thing that I can picture too, is just because of how much you value and respect the data side of it, and then you also value and put a lot of time into the psychology aspect of it. I can almost imagine like an AI partner just kind of helping you keep track of the data.
That would be good.
Wow, so that way you can just really focus on the mental side of it.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, actually. Yeah.
I would love to have like an AI person too, who's keeping track of all the blinking lights while just so I can focus on the conversation, right? So we can all use one. So I'm all for it. All right. So with that though, we are going to wrap this up. We did a couple of pauses, so the timer on this is a little artificially longer than usual, but I definitely feel like I've kept you for a good long while today, and I'm really thankful for your time. This was great.
It was really fun. I enjoyed it very much.
If you had any like other lingering points or thoughts or reactions or observations you wanted to make as a result of this conversation, the floor is yours once more. Otherwise, let the audience know where they can find you.
So I would just want to encourage people to take a mindful approach to dating, to be very accepting of themselves, to use self-compassion, to have a healthy relationship with themselves, to work on their emotions and just reacting more slowly to things, being less judgmental and giving people's behaviours the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, just working on yourself and having a healthy relationship with yourself. You meet your own emotional needs first, then you're in a better place to date and to be resilient in the dating process. So the best place to find me is on my website, rachelnewdatingcoach.co.uk.
Well, fantastic for that, Rachel. This has been a fantastic episode, and for as far as dating advice goes, people are welcome to message me, but if they want to know my strategies, it was like 99% prayer. So other than that, there's lots of great information out there, and I wish everybody luck in finding the right fit at the right time. So with that, this has been the Impactful Coaching Podcast, and it is an honor and a privilege to collect this information, learn what I can learn, share what I can share, and do my part to help get these messages out there. So thank you to everybody for your participation. It is our endeavor to ensure that in whatever way you are helping others, we want to make sure that you are impactful while you're at it.